Today on Uniweb Interview Show, C Wright-Hammer, author of Between Two Minds.
Hey! C Wright-Hammer, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Matt?
Thanks for joining me on Uniweb's Interview Show. How are you doing today?
Doing great. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to digging into this conversation.
It's gonna get weird, my friend.
For you and me.
It always does with me. I have a way with making things very awkward.
Sure.
I think that's part of the charm.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. Okay, we'll say it. Well, yeah, thanks for joining me. I'm so glad you're on with me. I don't know a ton about you. I've seen obviously your stuff on Twitter. I've read part of your book, Between Two Minds. It's a sci-fi. And how long has this been out, Between Two Minds, DC?
Book one came out in September 2017, so a year and a half ago or so. And then I worked right through. I didn't take any time off, and I delivered book two in October of last year, 2018. So that's two entries in the series. There's probably going to be a few more, but that's where we're at right now.
So how does it set up? Is it a continuing story, or is it like?
So book one, you follow Ryan Carter. He's a paraplegic who lives in the near future, and he's always wanted to walk his entire life. He, you kind of go through some of the trials and tribulations of being a disabled person, and people that have read it who are actually disabled have said that they appreciate the liberties I took to explain, even in today's age, and think in the future. That he has a rough experience. So he wants to get into a new body, and fortunately for him, he lives at a time where they offer what's called a mind migration. Essentially, you can have your mind downloaded, turned digitally, and uploaded into a new brain that's in a body of your choosing. And then there's a lot of fine print under all that body of your choosing, like, we can't guarantee results, all this stuff. And one of the side effects is potentially death, so they try to get themselves on a liability for that. Just a little. So you could die.
Minor side effect.
and so he does that. He gets into this new body, and it's a common procedure. It happens. Thousands of people do it, and he does it, and he's thinking everything's great and grand. But as soon as his migration happens, his mind's in this new body. All of a sudden, things get really weird. He starts having visions and dreams that seem real, but they're not his own. And he spends the rest of the book trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
So how do you... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say book two continues sort of that whole process. Without spoiling anything from book one, book two kind of unveils the origins of the actual procedure, like where it actually came from, not what they tell you in PR. And there's some other things involving some of the main characters from book one as well.
Yeah, so I imagine it playing out like some plastic surgeons have their commercials, like look beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, like change the way you look and feel better about yourself. Is it that kind? And how far into the future are we talking? If you could say.
Well, what's funny is I try not to get into too many specifics with that because I like to leave some of that to the reader.
Sure.
I've had readers say, oh, is it 100 years in the future? And I've had other readers say, this is like 10 years in the future. So I allude to a few things. There is a war in the Middle East, but it's shifted east to Pakistan. And so if you think of like the current political climate in America as well as in the Middle East, and you think shifting east is not actually very far from where there's some conflicts today. And so I try to allude to this is probably maybe a decade or two in the future, maybe 3 decades. But I leave some of those details out because once you start getting into hard numbers, in my mind, people either are going to forget it and it's not going to add to the story anyway, or they're going to hold you to it and say, that's not realistic at all. So, for me, I wasn't too keen on putting a firm date on it.
Yeah, so you leave it open to other people's understanding of it, which is good because it's realistic enough because when I think about it, like I was having this this conversation the other day that I feel like the next evolution is one of its, and I've heard other people talk about it too, but it's like a conscious evolution
Yep.
and to where we aren't like doing anything more with our bodies. The physical evolution has kind of gotten there. Now we're making a conscious shift to a different level. And when you talk about downloading consciousness, like that's a whole nother like, whoa, where did you come up with this idea?
So it was the culmination of a lot of things. When I first came up with the idea, I was working as a data migration specialist. I was taking systems that were in like a local environment, like at a business. So they had a server at a business, and they wanted to put all their data in the cloud instead. And so I would manage those projects of getting all their data from their local server all the way into the cloud securely, safely, in a timely manner, and make sure that they could access it all and they had everything they needed when they got in there. Right around that time, I actually experienced some pretty serious health issues that I had myself, and it was physical. My mind was fine, but my body was kind of going against me, was kind of doing its own thing, and it was a short scare, but it was enough to make me think, well, what if I needed to hit the ejector button? What if I needed to get out of this, what I call a host body, and get my mind, which is still active, which is still sharp, into a body that worked? And so it actually was therapeutic to write the fictional version of this, and then I chose something a little more, possibly a little more that people can relate to. Someone that has an obvious disability, someone who was born paralyzed from the waist down. You can identify with that. You understand that that's a condition, whereas my condition was a little more obscure. And so I kind of wanted to meld what I was doing professionally with what was going on in my personal life. And that came up with this really interesting, really crazy story that took a life of its own after I started writing it.
Wow, that's really really intense. It's because when you're talking about working in the field of data migration and that kind of thing, thinking of the human body and brain as hardware, it's like a liquid cooling system for a supercomputer in our brain, and then the consciousness is like software. And like throughout the years, we've had these different stories, and as storytellers, as writers, it's almost like we're evolving the software for the human race as we write. And that's such a cool thing, right? Like we're actually contributing to software platforms for humanity, if that makes any sense.
I think science fiction obviously is fiction, but I think it sets a standard, and I also think it gives pause and warning to where are we headed. And it's fun to write a thriller. It's not fun when, science is influenced too much by money, if science is influenced too much by politics, and it's not really science anymore. It becomes somebody's pet project, and they can do what they want with it. I mean, there's countless, science fiction movies, countless books that are out there that kind of warn us. I mean, Michael Crichton was one of the best ones. He had the formula of a monumental breakthrough, a bunch of scientists, something goes wrong, and then chase scenes for the rest of the book. Like, he had that formula, and it worked. And I didn't agree with all of his, takes on the world and even science, but I think he did a good job of, making us in our daily lives think about, just because we could, does that mean we should? And I think that, us, if we're active citizens, if we're, trying to work with people in power, like where do we want to spend scientific dollars? Where do we want education to go? Where do we want the next generation to focus on in terms of science? So I think those are related. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but that's kind of what came to mind.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it makes me think about the singularity. And where, human, and this is basically what it's talking about too, right? It's like the singularity where human become integrated with technology so much so that you can't tell the two apart. And I've read countless articles. I'm a huge sci-fi nut. I love science, technology. I love astrophysics and quantum physics and all this kind of stuff dealing with particles, the small pieces that make us all up. Like we all have universes inside of us, but also translate into like these massive things outside of us. What do you think about the singularity? Do you think it's something that's coming sooner rather than later?
So I definitely think artificial intelligence is going to, that's probably the next big revolution in terms of technology. I do think that is going to be something that we have to deal with again, because even if we program artificial intelligence to begin with as, hey, I go back to like the laws of robotics by Asimov, the things that we need to instill sort of values in artificial intelligence and actually making that leap. I do think that, I think that's going to come probably in our lifetime, that it'll pass in 2014, there was a passing of the Turing test, where a person interacts with an artificial type intelligence and couldn't tell a difference between that and a human interaction. So those things are already happening.
Yeah.
And you're looking at exponential growth in technology between 2014 and 5 years later. So I think that's going to happen. Now, how that's going to affect humans, I mean, I took a lot of liberties in my book to digitize memories, to digitize someone's personality. That's not something we can necessarily do. There's not ones and zeros inside people's heads. So how could we take humans and upload them or download them? That's where the fiction comes in my book. But I wanted to at least open the discussion. I wanted to think about the possibilities, because just because we can't do it today doesn't mean that we won't figure it out in 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, it's scary. it's like Terminator 2 or Terminator and all these different movies, and I mean, it's really exciting to think about, but at the same time, it's terrifying to think about. Like, do you have a bunker set up in your house in case this happens in the next couple of years?
See, I don't know. I think I think that I have a different take on it. I'm actually writing a book right now that's going to address some of this, but I don't really believe
that. Is this book 3 in the series, or is this a separate book?
Well, I've got a side project. I'm like 60,000 words into a side project because that's what writers do, and we have a problem. I'm compulsive, but no, I don't see enough sci-fi writers actually saying that AI can be altruistic or it can have more of a good spin on it, and so I wanted to write something contemporary, almost like speculative fiction, that takes place the next year or two and plays on some current, some current trends and some current news items, and say that maybe AI actually wouldn't target all of humanity, but they might target a certain segment, and maybe that segment isn't just all the people that work every day. Maybe it's the people that don't work every day. And now you start to think about, well, who really works the hardest in our society? And yeah. I have my opinions on that, and others have their opinions on that. But what if AI actually could harmoniously live with a segment of the human race, and maybe it was targeting another portion? I'll leave it at that without too many spoilers. But I that's near and dear to me, that I think they want people to be against this advancement in technology, but why? And my theory is that AI is going to figure out the big secret that there's a certain segment of the population that would actually not benefit from a higher authority knowing all the you can't politicize AI unless you program it that way. But if it's true AI, it'll figure you out.
Yeah. That's really interesting, man. I think, I was going to say, obviously it's a fear-based thing. Mm-hmm. It's something that we just don't know, right? It's like anything greater than me is terrifying, right? Anything that has the potential to outthink me, which if you really think about it, a lot of things have the potential to outthink me. They do it all the time.
my 2-year-old outthinks me sometimes. I swear, she's a firecracker.
And my dog outthinks me all the time. She's constantly getting one over on me. It's like, and that's a dog. Like, I'm gonna be in trouble when robots come, for sure.
Although when there's snow outside and like I can see the tracks that she's sniffing, it's a lot less magical. I'm just gonna put it. I can see that. I got you.
Yes. So that's interesting. I didn't think about that. Very cool. So you're working on a third book, separate project. Are you working on you're working on the third book in the series of Between Two Minds?
So I'm actually, because again, I'm between like a dozen minds. But
no.
But I'm working on a side project. I'm working on book 3, and book 3 is actually going to be a prequel to book 1. It's actually going to take off from a side story in book 2 and expound upon. I introduced a main character in book 2 who's crucial to the whole series. She plays a huge role in her. I just couldn't fit in her whole backstory into book 2. So I'm taking book 3. I'm going to take a step back, and I want to explain how she gets from where we find her. There's actually 2 points we see her. At the end of Despair and at the beginning of her rebirth, basically. We see her in 2 different places. And so I want to connect the dots for readers, and I can do that in probably 80,000 words. I can't do that, in a book that was already 130,000 words. So,
wow. Yeah.
And there's something special about that prequel because the whole series is predicated on being between 2 minds. And so the challenge for me has always been to give both minds, in a particular host, their own voice, their own personality, make them separate and different. So with this prequel in book 3, I actually am taking on a co-author. We're going to write every other chapter, literally be between 2 minds. And the goal is not to have our writing styles be identical, but to still make it a cohesive story.
That's a pretty trusting thing to do, man. I know, like, if I don't even like people reading my work while I'm like, and being like, well, you need something here, something here. I'm like, get the hell out of my head, face. Right? Who did you decide? Like, how did you come about finding somebody to write the other part?
It took someone that I trust, and it took someone I thought was capable of doing it, and someone that is both open to criticism but can also criticize me. So I haven't made the big reveal yet on who it is publicly. So right now it is a secret. Once we get farther along, we're kind of just in a lot more of the planning phase. I think both of us have about 3,000 to 5,000 words written, just kind of getting some thoughts out. But once we're farther along in the process and we're closer to releasing, this person will make their big author debut, and we will begin jointly marketing and prepping for the release of it. And I think it's going to be really interesting if we can pull it off. One of the things that I try to do, I try to walk the fine line between being pretentious and innovative, because that is a fine line. Like, you try too hard, and people are going to say you're a dope. Why'd you do that? You don't try hard enough, and people aren't going to read you because you're boring. So I try to walk that fine line, and so. Every chapter in both book 1 and book 2 drops you into a scene. You're in a mind. You're not sure which one it is. You have to read to figure it out. So there's some mental work you have to do. And so I wanted to play on that in book 3 even further. And so I've got some interesting writing styles, techniques, even some formatting differences that I want to do that really challenges my readers. Now, if they're 3 books into my series, they should know that you don't just come and do this casual reading on Sunday. Like, you need to be invested if you're going to read this book. And so, I don't know, maybe I have a really high standard for my readers, but I like to do those kinds of things.
And so it takes some digesting. I mean, it's not, you're going to have to take some time to actually think about what's going on.
Yeah, I think I try to write in a solid way. I don't try to write. Occasionally, I'll get a little poetic, but mostly it's just get through. It's an adventure. It's a character-driven, first-person adventure for book 1. So it's get the reader through. So don't let the writing hold them up from experiencing the story. I mean, I joke with some of my writer friends. I tell them I'm a better storyteller than I am a writer. Writing is just the medium I chose, but it could be a movie. It could be a mini series. If Netflix is watching this, it could be a Netflix series. I'm just saying.
Absolutely. They're watching. I know.
Right. But no, I think that I think my writing holds up, or I wouldn't have the reviews that I'm getting, because I didn't. These are real people reviewing my book, and they actually think it holds up. So.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, so how long have you been writing for?
So 2014, I started dabbling at the end of 2014. So 3.5, 4 years, almost 5 years going on at the end of this year. I mean, in high school, I was doing poetry and short stories. I wrote a young adult fiction. I had big plans for it in high school, but it was a serial killer who was still in high school. Like, I wanted to write this cool thing. This was before Dexter. And he was the main character. Like, what's the perspective of a high schooler who likes to compulsively kill people? And I actually got really far with it. It was 10, 15,000 words in, and then that was back in the day when we didn't have cloud backups, and that computer died, and so the story kind of went with it. And so I was really I was upset. And so life went on. I went to college, I got a job, I got married, I had kids, and then, you know, the spark to be creative again didn't come for 3 or 4 years ago. So.
And it just kind of hit you like a sack of bricks, or what? Just had to sit down and start writing, or how did it come to you?
You know, it's funny. I actually had like 2 or 3 cool scenes in mind. I was going to get crazy with book 1. I was going to have like first person past tense for some chapters and first person present tense for some, and like, you know, fifth person omniscient, like, I
do that all the time on accident,
right? No, so I was gonna be crazy with it, and I actually put it in front of my wife, and she's like, "What is this?" Like, she's like, "This part's cool. This other stuff I don't know about." And so it was really, you know, and I'm like you, putting my stuff in front of people. It's like giving them your baby, and you're hoping that they love them, and the baby doesn't poop on them or something. Like, and so I gave it to her, and she's like, "No, this is crap. Like, you know, do better." And she's good. She's good like that. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking I'm a writer. You know, and I came away like, "You just don't get my art." Like, you know, I was kind of a little scrunchy about it, but
feeling, man.
Right. But no, I went back to the drawing board. She really challenged me, and I've told her this, and she refuses to take credit. But I tell her, I'm like, "No, you made me go back, and like, you can't do too much." So that's where I was being pretentious. Dial it back. There's a way you could tell this story that's innovative and compelling and will engage readers. And so that's kind of what I did. I took the next year and a half, almost 2 years, for book 1 just to get it in a place where I was comfortable. And then I went online, and I'm like, "What do I do now?" And that was a whole journey.
Yeah, so you went Amazon KDP, right?
Well, first, I didn't think that I had something that was publishing ready. I knew that it was just between formatting and editing and everything, I needed something to do with it. I didn't know the concept of beta readers back then, or like, you know, and I was also like, it's my art. I don't want anyone to see it until it's polished. Like, I was like very much like that dumb artist that, like, dude, like, come on, like, seriously. And so I went on the internet, and I just started for about a week. I was just looking up editors, who's a good editor out there. And I actually found a really good one. Her name's Deborah Hartman, and she works the Indie Author Professional Services, IAPS.com, something like that.
Okay.
She offers from basically where you feel you have a an end draft, a final draft. She takes it from there through the editing process. She has proofreaders, she has concept editors, she has, basically every editor that you would want along the way. And if she's available, she'll often take you under her wing. And she took my first book, got it into publish ready, and worked with me through the whole process, explained to me what was happening at each turn. I got to accept every edit. So she would send me back the edits, and she's like, here's what we want to change. And there was a lot of like, here's why we want to change it. And I had to just accept, or maybe I wanted to keep it, or maybe I wanted to change it. And so we really massaged the book into the state we got it to release. Then she works with, part of her organization is the design team, the interior and exterior design. And so she hands the project off as we're finishing up editing to the designer, get them going on interior design and get them designing the cover. And so you end up with all your publishing files ready to publish and your cover files ready to hit, send, ready to upload. And so I say all that. It was rather expensive. It took some convincing of my wife to actually sign off on the check, but she did. And, I'm happy with the results. I think, that's one of the things that people have this conception that if you self-publish, you're just throwing anything out there. You're throwing a first draft on the internet and you're hoping to make it big. And that's certainly true. I mean, some people have done that and they've kind of given the rest of us a bad name. But I really wanted to go out with a polished product out there. So,
well, it seems to have paid off too, right? I mean, the book's doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I could live off of. However, right. It's not going anywhere. That's the awesome thing. Like, it's kind of neat to, the whole process of hitting publish, getting it out there. random strangers on the internet purchasing it, liking it, or disliking it. I haven't had a ton of that. Like most people who get into it and understand what they're getting into when they read at least book one, they really like it. And that's actually kind of carried over to book two. I actually did do things a little differently in book two, where I did, instead of first person, I did first person, third person. So there was a little bit of head hopping. That's what people kind of think of that. And it was also
Are you doing that between chapters or like in chapter?
Mostly between chapters. There's a couple of flashbacks here or there, but no, mostly the first and third perspectives. Those are chapter broken up. But then with that, the way book two was kind of ended up is you're between two times for most of book two, meaning you're following the main character through the story, but you're also getting backstory, and you're seeing how those two, the sort of the prequel. It's why it's hard for me to call it the sequel, because it's really a prequel and a sequel in one, and those culminate to the end of the story. Basically, I'm giving you backstory, and it's all leading up to where the rest of the book is going, and then they converge. There's 25 chapters. They converge around chapter 22 or 23, and then the last 2 or 3 chapters are just taking you the rest of the way.
That sounds really interesting, man. I'm gonna have to dig back into the book. I told you before we started the interview, the way I saw you on Twitter first was I saw the book Between Two Minds, and this was in the middle. I was probably 40 to 50,000 words into the book I'm writing, and it's about like being two different people, and I was like, oh my God.
Right.
I thought my original idea had been stolen or already done. And thankfully, I mean, you've done a great job, but it's different than what I'm doing. But when you just said switching between first person and third person, I'm actually doing that same thing. Like the chapters are in first person, and then they move to third person when it goes into the other person's realm of reality. It's a fun way to write. It's like writing 2 books in one, which is mind-boggling to me to be able to do, because you really do have to be like split, schizophrenic, like different people, man.
Oh yeah. No.
Do you get into a state of mind? Do you get into a certain state when you write? Like, do you have what's your practice when you get down to writing?
It's it can't, for me, it can't be schizophrenic. Like I have to hone in on the chapter I'm writing, on the character I'm writing, on the scene I'm writing. So that's where it hasn't happened as of late, but sometimes you'll get into that writing realm where you just lose time. Like suddenly it's like 2 a.m. and you're like, I probably should eat something and go to bed, or like, I don't know where I am. Like,
where am I?
Right. I took a half day from work one time, and I got home at like 12:30, and I just started writing. And then I swear, like I had just started writing, and my wife's coming home at 4:30 from work, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Like I was literally like kind of freaked out because I was writing a serious chapter that I went through a writer wormhole, and I ended up on the other side. Fortunately, I didn't lose body parts or anything in the process. But no, I wrote like I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 words just straight, and it was good stuff. And so. I think for me, that's the way I manage it, because then after I write a chapter, I can go back and get that sort of analytical, more top-down view of it and see, does that chapter really serve the purpose? Does it fit where it needs to be? Is it true to the character? And I could do some more of that high-level stuff that can really bog you down. If you're worried about that while writing, for me, I can't do that. I can't be schizophrenic. I have to be very of one mind and one goal while I'm writing.
Yeah, and I guess that's been one of the things that has thrown me recently is it's not necessarily because of the writing so much as that in my life I'm doing so many different things as well, but like trying to stay focused on, all right, this is the chapter I'm working on, let's just stay here. When I do that, it's great, but otherwise it's just like all over the place. I did want to ask too, so you have do you have like a word number you try to hit every day, like a quota you try to hit, or?
That I think that was true when I was writing book 1 and book 2, and to a lesser extent, I mean, I actually was pretty open about this. I blogged about it, but in August, for some reason, I lost my writer mojo. I don't know what you call it, but I lost a lot of things. Like something weird happened in August. I think like I don't know. My creative juices just stopped flowing altogether, and I stopped reading. I stopped writing, and just kind of I was doing a lot of like work around the house. I was doing a little bit more exercising. I was doing some other things, but it just kind of went away. And it was kind of that way for like 3 or 4 or 5, almost 6 months. And then it's just been recently that I've actually, like, I was only writing like 1,000 words a month back then. But recently,
did you freak out when that was happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on top of the normal freaking out I do all the time anyway, like, this is like, okay, I got one more list item of freaking out to do because I'm a writer. But I really started to embrace it. You know, I'm really active in the Twitter writing community, and I started in the fall. I started doing the indie author spotlight. So what I do is I open it up to anybody, any indie author who's either published or about to publish, and they can self-publish. They can be with a small, press or something like that. But as long as they consider themselves indie, and I spotlight them for a week. I send me some pictures of yourself, your book, book cover. Give me a quick bio, give me something you want readers to know, and let me put it on my website, and I'll promote for you. I'll do this self-promotion that you can't do for you. Because if you do it too much, you look like those, you look like a spammer. If you don't do it enough, no one's ever going to know you exist. And so indie authors really put their, and I did another blog, they're really between two minds, let's be honest. Plug there. But if I can do it for them, and I offer it for free, it literally takes me maybe 15 to 30 minutes on a Sunday morning. I put it, or I'll usually do the preview on Friday, send them an email, hey, check this out, let me make sure it's okay, and then post it on Sunday. Do a tweet, do a couple Facebook posts, and it doesn't take much effort on my account. But what I found is being able to spend time with other indie authors, even if it's just a little bio thing that's in public. It's me doing something for the community, doing something for others. And so what I lost in creativity, I gained in more of a, I don't know, I guess I'm building my brand to some extent, that people know that I'm not just in it to win it. I'm not just in it for myself. I'm here to help people out. And so that's been one good side effect of losing the creative flow.
That's crazy, man. That service mindset. Because I don't know how I did not know this, that you were doing this. Like it's basically what I'm doing, right? Like I'm doing you've been doing it, and I've found because my creative flow has kind of been stymied a little bit, but I found this amazing gift of not only being able to help other writers, tell their story, but I'm learning so much from other writers on accident, but I didn't know I was going to learn so much. I mean, it's not like I know everything, but that wasn't the reason I set out. The reason I set out was like you, I thought it'd be nice to try to promote other people's work, because I thought, God, there's so many people who write books, so many indie authors, and it's so hard to get your stuff out there. I was like chasing people down, like reading my book. I was like, Matt, stop. You are being ridiculous. Like, that's no way to sell a book, So what was it that made you think wanting to do this? What brought you to that conclusion to go for it?
Well, it really was, I didn't have anything better to do. I wasn't writing. And I'm like, the least I could do is, spend some of that time in the writing world, and also broaden my horizons. Who do I think are the up and comers? Who's got a really cool book out there I never heard of? And by opening it up, and it really is a free service, and people are so hesitant to even, jump in on free things, because they think, well, what's the catch? When is it going to bite me? When are they going to ask me for $10 or something like that? And I made it clear, like, this is free. I'm offering it because I can. The other thing I've added this, so I did 13 weeks in the fall, ending in January, and then I started to back up. I took a week off in February, and I'm going to go through April, up to May. And what I did this time is try to get other indie authors involved and say, if you sign up for this, you're agreeing to actually share, not just me sharing on my social media, but there's 13 authors. That's 14 of us that can share everybody's work. That can share the spotlights I put together. And now we're starting to be more than independent. We're still independent. We're protecting that side of it, but we're working together to help spread the word about interesting indie authors that are out there. That have their own story. They're real people doing real jobs, like that are just trying to have anybody read their stuff and give them an honest review. Like just they're the server at the restaurant. They're the bartender. They're working IT. They're the mechanic. They're all these normal people who've got these awesome books and creative sides to them. And if I'm fortunate enough to have my own website, so I figured I might as well.
That's exactly what it is. It's actually being a community of writers, because I talk to people about this all the time, how lonely writing can be, if we allow it to be. But like we all want to write, we all want to tell a story, and if we can all just work together, I think there's enough success for everybody. And
sure.
And you'll find this out because now that I'm interviewing you'll be invited to there's a big group chat
okay.
of all the people I've been interviewed. And it's like we're all helping each other,
Yeah.
And it's great. And anybody who wants to be involved, and that's the thing, right? It's not like the only requirement is that you write, that you're a writer who wants to publish or who wants to have a story told. And that's the only requirement, because I think everyone has an incredible story to tell, and it just has to be let out, And being a channel for that's such a gift, right? To be able to help somebody else.
Yeah, I think it really came to a head when I stacked up all 13 indie authors that I did for the first round, and I tagged them all, and I did a blog about them, and I talked about how much they helped me. They look at me as someone who helped them, and they really think I have my stuff together, and I don't know how to break it to them. But
it's like
right, no, just enough to get by. Let me be honest,
right.
But putting it all together and really putting into a sincere blog that basically said, like, you helped me get through one of the hardest, like, I haven't been a writer very long, but it's a very challenging period because I'm not actively writing on a daily basis, sometimes not on a weekly basis. And so being able to spend time with people who I believe, some of them are probably writing every day, makes me feel like I'm at least contributing. I think the other side of it, too, is that it does broaden my horizons, and finding out things like, where do beta readers, I didn't know about beta readers, and then they're like, what about alpha readers? I'm like, oh no, not more readers that I don't know about. And
what's an alpha reader?
Exactly. It's people who read your drafts, actually, and the definition varies depending, but they read it even before it goes to whatever. Some people go beta reader after alpha reader, after they make all their changes from the feedback of alpha readers, and they go to beta readers. Some people go to editors, then go to beta readers. But then if they need more edits, people have their own process for doing it. And like you said, the learning, the understanding that there is no right way, there's a bunch of different ways. And for me, I took the path of using the indie author publishing services with book 1 and book 2, and I expect to use it for my series. But one of the things I want to do, and I wanted to write a book outside the series, is I want to start tapping some, independent editors. I want to tap some other independent designers, get a book cover done by, somebody who is really talented, but maybe doesn't, have the exposure that others do. And so really dive into the writing community and all the people who are kind of part of that, and tap in and buy services from these other independent service providers. So that's one of the cool things, is learning about all that.
Yeah, it's like small businesses, right? I mean, it's like just being a part of that community of small businesses. Everybody trying to get their story out there and do their thing. Like, finding somebody to design a cover was probably the hardest thing for me. I drew my first cover.
Hey.
I did color pencil. But it was like, I had nobody around to help me. I wasn't even on Twitter at the time. I had no idea about the writing community, about any of that stuff. And so I was like, I got to do something, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to get this freaking book out there. Because when you hit publish, is it not one of the most, like, incredibly freeing experiences of your life?
Oh, it's I likened it in a blog post that I wrote. It's basically like, in Indiana Jones, where he thinks he's going to get out of the cavern and he turns around and there's this big ball chasing him. Like, that's kind of what it's like. It's like, hey, there's the exit, but I've got this looming. I've got to market. I've got to, I've got to keep up with sales. I've got to keep up with expenses if I want to track it as a business. It's like all of a sudden. I took a screenshot of the publish button before it was pressed, and then I took a screenshot of it after it was pressed, because why not? Never going to get to do that again. So, right. So I did that, but it's as exciting as it is terrifying, because that ball that's chasing you of designing and marketing, that is always chasing you if you really want to make it as an indie author. And if you run too far ahead and try to self-promote yourself too much, you're going to be seen as a spammer, and people aren't going to take you very seriously. If you don't do it enough, you're going to get run over, and no one's ever going to know about you. Or I like analogies, but sometimes I take them a little too far. So
it's good. I love analogies. It's how I think. That's perfect. Yeah, because you got to stay somewhere in the middle, right?
Right.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, no, it's been a ride, and I think. The cool thing about the next, I feel like I don't know, like I graduated. I pumped out 2 books, and now I'm really at a point where I can decide. I feel like I can decide where I want to go as a writer. And so in July, my editor, I pulled my editor aside. I'm like, hey, what about this marketing side? Like, I was never very good at it with book 1. I didn't sell a ton of book 1, and I'm printing book 2, and she's like, that'll help, and book 2 does help. People like to know that you've got a series, but nothing happens by itself. Like, you have to do everything from step 1 to everything else. And so one of the blog posts I'm currently writing is building a brand is a pain in the ass. Basically, everything takes a long time. Everything takes 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 weeks. And so one of the things I'm going to elaborate in this blog that I'm going to post is that it's good that it takes time, and it's good that you're not inundated. I mean, would it be great if someone picked up my book and bought 1,000 copies? I would take it tomorrow, believe me. But one of the things that I've been allowed to do is schedule interviews like this, schedule get on book reviewers' timelines, and even if it's a month or 2 or 3 months out, get on their timeline today. And build that relationship, and have every week or every 2 weeks have something different to promote your writing, to promote yourself as an author, and build that brand. It's good that it takes a long time. It's a lot of hard work, and it's frustrating because you just want to break through, but embrace that timeline, I think, is kind of what I'm starting to do for myself.
No, that's powerful advice, because it really is. It's like building a house. It's like, what kind of house do you want to have? Do you want to have one built of straw in the tiny shack, or do you want to have, like, for me, I have extremely lofty goals for myself, and it sounds like you've got some pretty big goals too. But if I'm going to build a foundation for a massive, successful career, I better be willing to take some time to dig up a good site and get to bedrock and really lay down some good foundation, and because there's so much we learn during that process, right? Like, I thought I was just going to pump out book after book after book. I mean, it literally took me 3 months to do 2 books. Because I had no idea what I was doing besides just writing it like an insane person. And then I was like I was 60,000 words into book 3 on month 4. And this started up, and I'm so thankful it did, because the whole process is changing for me now. So where it's like becoming something that, okay, Matt, you have all these lofty goals for yourself on your goal board. Now it's time to get serious about laying a foundation. And that does take time, but that's something that none of us want to do. We don't want to we want it now. I want it now.
Yeah, I mean, there are good people out there. You find them. The problem is that free services and a lot of the good people jump on it real quick. And so, I mean, that's the problem that I have with the Indie Author Spotlight, is that I'll get 13 weeks. I commit to 13 weeks, and I do that on purpose, because that's, a little over 3 months, or right around 3 months. But then I want to give myself a break, and I also want to give that week buffer to really highlight all of the last 13 weeks and tag everybody and make that sort of the culmination. But, for someone to come to me and say, I can't spotlight you for 4 months, is a little, in my mind, it just doesn't feel right. So you have to put a limit on it, unfortunately. But I think the more of us that see that anybody can help out, anybody can roll up their sleeves and help build that foundation for others, and they could do it in an honest way. They can do it in a very integrated way where you're doing your part, everyone else is doing their part, and you're moving everyone forward. I think the writing community has a lot of potential that it's already tapping into, and I think there's a lot more that could be tapped into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like I said, I've only been on it for 2 months now, but it's plugging into it has been amazing. What it's done for me personally, and just building relationships with people and getting to do stuff like this that I never thought was even possible, And
the tough part is you don't know who's a bot, you don't know who's a scammer, you don't know, honestly.
Well, I have an idea. If you pop into my DMs right after I follow you,
right,
I'm gonna be like, yeah, sorry, bro.
But when you first signed on, you see that and you're like, oh, maybe that's something I need to be doing. New people to Twitter think that that's cool. They think that that's how you sell books, and in fact, it's not. It's not a way to build friendships, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, great piece of advice. So if you're new to Twitter and you're a writer and you get followed and you follow somebody back, do not immediately send them a DM with your book saying thanks for following me. That turns me off. I'm just like, all right, this is basically, it feels like a bot. It feels like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time it is. Honestly, you can automate a lot of that stuff where you get a new follower and they can just send a DM. Twitter's cracking down on it a little bit, but it still happens. They say you're not supposed to do it, but people still do. Automate that process. I think it's a lot of it is it might have worked 5 or 10 or 15 years ago when Twitter was literally brand new 5-10 years ago. But it's not. It's a different playing ground. I mean, there's so many. The writing community is enormous. I mean, I have 5,000 followers, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's people with hundreds of thousands of indie authors that are following them, and I think when you're new, you just don't know what's acceptable. You think that you should be spamming your book. You think that you should be doing that, and I did. I was definitely not guilty of any of that. But you learn. You find. You find a couple of posts that rub you the wrong way because they're calling you out. Don't spam your book. Oh, fine, okay, I won't. But then again, and it was in my blog post about how indie authors are constantly between two minds. Do I push my book? Do I not? Do I pay someone to market, or do I do it myself and still pay? Do I, and the answer is there is really no right answer. You have to try to figure out what works for you. Where does your book fall in the niche? Where are your skills as a marketer? How much money do you have? Do you know reputable marketers? Because some people will take your money. They will do what they say. They'll tweet about you or Facebook about you to 50,000 followers. Well, that doesn't mean that it's going to sell anything. And so I think it's tough. It's tough to know what the right thing for you to do is. It's tough to know where to place what few marketing dollars most of us have these days. And, so taking a step back, looking at the writing community as a whole, offering a free service, things like interviews like this and an indie author spotlight that I run, I think is a way to really establish yourself first and foremost as someone that's going to give. And I think a lot of other things fall in place after that. You really build some strong friendships. I have, I became, and I'm going to call someone out. I won't call them out by name, but I'll call them out by nickname. But we have it's called the Trey Gang. This guy made a typo, and we busted his chops for this typo. There was 12 of us. We busted his chop so hard it became a gang, and now we're all part of the Trey Gang. And it's just it sounds funny. It's even more hysterical when you're 37 levels down deep into Twitter GIFs and you're just cracking up and puns and all kinds of funny stuff. And you start to consider these are real people. I consider them friends. I consider them, maybe they disappear tomorrow because they end up hating Twitter or something like that. But it's been real memories, real people that I have friendships with, and they've gone a long way to helping me get through, creative struggles and things like that, and to see like, and they start reading my stuff, and that's when it gets really real. Like, these are other writers who are reading my stuff, and if it doesn't hold up, they're gonna bust my chops, and like, maybe they'll be nice about it, maybe they'll stop talking to me, who knows?
Dude, it's freaking scary.
Right. So, but I think that's it. I think that's why I say being an indie author is kind of like being like Indiana Jones. It's fun. You get to discover all these cool things, but poisonous darts and angry natives and all kinds of other things are coming at you all the time, and you don't know.
Find that short stack.
Right. You gotta find friends. You gotta find people to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say the people I've met on Twitter, like I really do feel like they're my friends now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people are real. I don't know if it's easier to be real on Twitter because you're not like face to face, so it's a little bit easier. But I'm pretty honest and open on Twitter. But I was gonna say that other thing is like we do have to remain. I think as long as we remain open and willing to take criticism on some level and try to, without losing ourselves completely in it, but just try to refine ourselves, because there's so many people who know so much more and are so much more successful than me out there that I can take advice from, as long as I don't get all into my feelings, which is easy because I'm a creative person. I love my feelings. Yeah. Dude, this has been really, really interesting conversation, DC. I really appreciate your time, man. I did want to give you I wanted to ask you two things real quick. One, how far out is your Indie Spotlight author spotlight booked up for? Because I'd be interested in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And two, if leaving the writing community with anything from this interview, what would be your most important or crucial thing that you could leave us with?
Okay, one. Since you reach out to me, and this was true, I've got another person, so I'm taking the last week in April off, I think it is, to spotlight the whole group. Okay. But then I've got someone already for May. They were happy to take it out 3 months. But yeah, obviously you could be slotted in after that, because we've had this conversation, and that I'm doing my best. But I don't want to rush it. I don't want to make it one day. I don't want to make it 5 days. I want it to be a whole solid week to really get a good spotlight out of it. So absolutely. And then I'm going to open it up to another round of 13 and then take a week off and just keep doing it until I find something better. Maybe take on somebody who will do it, for me while I'm doing other things. But I want to keep it going because I think it's a great way to highlight people's work. So there's that. Leaving the writing community with anything. I don't know. I've been part of the writing community on Twitter since July. I would say be authentic. Be yourself, and you got to give a little to get anything. You got to open up if you want people to open up to you, and that doesn't mean that you should feed trolls. It doesn't mean that you should be silly and sign up for someone's like, hey, give me $50, I'll market your book. That's not being open. That's being silly. But really,
I like to say silly when you mean stupid.
I'm a parent. I'm a parent, so I've stricken the word stupid from my vocabulary. I've got to say things like silly. Nice. That driver is silly with a couple of extra 4-letter words in there. But no, really, it's just be yourself. If you are, an introvert that doesn't like to joke around, that's fine. That's who you are. Be that person. If that means that you're busy writing more of the very short, stories, in those days, I still haven't figured out how to do those very short stories, the VSS stuff. There's like a template somewhere you're supposed to follow in a story with keywords. I don't know. I haven't figured that part out. But maybe people are doing that as opposed to doing the more personal stuff that you and I do, where we engage other indie authors, gather their information, and post it on the web. Find your niche and be yourself and embrace it. If you're trying to, be a drama queen or something like that and get too much attention, if you're going out and posting a dozen times one day and then you're absent for 3 days and then you're coming back and just tweeting, some of that, does it frustrate me? Not really. I am curious what's going on in that person's head. In some cases, I'm worried. for some people that are like that. You know, we've got our lives, but to me that sounds like you're either trying to fill a role or something like that. You don't have to do that. You just got to be yourself.
Absolutely. We all need to speak with our own voice, right?
Yeah.
Be heard. Awesome. C Wright-Hammer, author of Between Two Minds, the sequel, and the third one coming out soon. Prequel. Well,
soon as
works.
Right.
Soonish.
Yeah.
It's in the works.
Yep.
It's the whip. Thank you so much for coming on Uniweb interview show. I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. Take care.
You have a great day. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you would, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification for the bell. Uniweb, we love you, love you, love you. Uniweb.